Hello and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran suing Nokia for unpaid ringtone royalties from 2008, or else a scrappy upstart sampling 2008 ringtones for your new career as a tattooed-faced SoundCloud rapper, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it is the first Friday of April 2020. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. This show today is brought to you by Bandzoogle, built by musicians and for musicians. Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I am old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Jacques who rolled his own cigarettes with bugler tobacco and dressed like Neo from The Matrix with a black leather duster that had just a heavy layer of dandruff on the shoulders from his blunt cut of his hair. And old Jacques would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. We don't have to do that anymore. We have Bandzoogle. We have nice things. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. You get hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, social media integration, mailing list tools. You can even crowdfund your next project commission-free. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Normally, this is the part of the show where I tell you where I'll be playing live, and it won't be anywhere in the world because of the old Rona virus, but on Sunday night on my YouTube channel, just go to YouTube, type in Joe Pug channel. Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, I will be playing the entirety of my first album, Nation of Heat, cover to cover, followed by some other songs from my catalog and then some Q&A. So stop on by YouTube, 9 p.m. on Sunday night, this coming Sunday night, April 5th. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast and want to help it remain a viable endeavor for me during these strange times, during times where I cannot go out on the road and make a living, it would help me very much if you would become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support a creative endeavor that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You type in The Working Songwriter or you type in my name and you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month. Think of it as basically a voluntary subscription. Is what it is. And if you have a stable income right now, it would really help me if you'd kick in a few bucks, price of a cup of coffee every month, to hear these shows. If you don't have a stable income right now, that's fine. We're going to be here for you for free for the entirety of this global pandemic. So thank you very much for listening. John Paul has already done our program once before. He was kind enough to take some time out of his day last week to catch up with us again and to, in some ways, take our mind off of this bizarre situation that we find ourselves in. I hope you guys enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. My guest today has seen many sides of the music business, from the inside of a staff writer's room to a star turn at the Grammys to the role of executive at his own record label. John Paul White was born in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and grew up in Loretto, Tennessee. He spent a decade plus in Nashville writing songs for EMI and was even slated to release a solo album of his own for Capitol Records before his debut, The Long Goodbye, fell victim to turmoil at the label. That impediment only set the stage, though, for his fortuitous meeting with Joy Williams at a songwriter's workshop. The two formed the folk duo, The Civil Wars. Their second show was recorded and released as Live from Eddie's Attic, and it attracted an immediate cult following. That sent them on a trajectory that would include late-night TV appearances, celebrity endorsements, and perhaps, most unlikely of all, a folk album that went to number 10 on the Billboard 200. When their first studio album, Barton Hollow, was released, they toured supporting Adele. The group would go on to win 4 Grammy Awards and a Golden Globe nomination. The Civil Wars called it quits abruptly in 2014. Since then, John Paul has founded Single Lock Records, which has an impressive roster of talent that includes St. Paul and the Broken Bones, Nicole Atkins, and our guest from last month, Aaron Ray. He's also released a few solo albums, the latest of which is entitled The Hurting Kind. John has already appeared on our program once before, so I encourage you to go back and listen to his original episode. He was kind enough to take some time out of his day recently to jump on the phone and appear on our program again. Hey, brother, you got me?
I do have you. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. I'm sorry for the kerfluffle yesterday. That was a total fuck up, man. My bad.
It was worth it just to hear you say kerfluffle.
I know. I've aroused many people, men and women, with my use of that word in the past. How are you, man? Are you home? This virus brought you straight off the road, didn't it?
Yeah, I was about halfway, and we can talk about this when you hit record, but yeah, I was about halfway through a tour up in New England.
Yeah, we're recording right now, so we can just jump into it. Yeah. I do want to talk for a moment. It would be remiss to not talk about the virus for a moment, but I think what I'd really like to do is just pick your brain for a while after that, just about some questions I had after our last interview that have nothing to do with the virus, and maybe we can all just enjoy a conversation instead of refreshing CNN and Fox News every 10 seconds. But I would be remiss. Where were you? How did the cancellations come your way? What did it look like? What were the emotions going through you when you had to cancel a tour that had long been planned?
What I was doing was something I don't do a lot of, which was doing some support dates. And the reason I was doing those is because it was with a good friend of mine, Rose Cousins, and she's a Canadian artist and was playing Toronto and Ottawa, but also the Maritimes. And I'd never been to the Maritimes, so Halifax, Prince Edward Island, up that way. And I said, you know what? Seems like a good way to get touring 2020. Going, but I was really intending to spend quite a bit of time at home, to be frank, hoping to write, hoping to live a little bit and have something to write about for this next record. I've just been touring pretty much nonstop for the past 2 or 3 years, and I needed to recharge. But I said yes to this, and there was a big gap in the middle of it, so decided, I haven't been to Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, upstate New York. Haven't done that in quite a while, so I dipped down, just doing the solo thing, me and my guitar.
Yeah.
And it was good. It was therapeutic. It was I was enjoying it, and good crowds. But as we went along, the cloud kept getting thicker and darker and hanging over everything. But in Canada, the vibes were great. Everybody was like, yeah, this will probably be bad, but, we'll ride it out and we'll wash our hands. And then once I got into the States, it got a little heavier, and each night was, people had a little bit different look in their eye. And a lot of, man, I can't believe you're here. I'm so happy you're here kind of things. And it just kept getting more and more ominous. A lot of people just, didn't want to say the word coronavirus. It was really odd times, especially once I got down to Massachusetts. And the governor was on the wire every other day, and then New York, the same thing. And toward about what would normally be the halfway point, it was really like every 24 hours, the vibe completely changed.
Mm.
In the rooms, people were so happy to be there and so happy it was still happening, and very respectful and trying to, but they were packed rooms at the time. And, we obviously were offering ticket refunds if you wanted them and you wanted to stay home. But, I knew it was when I played Passim in Cambridge. We had 40 people not show. We had a double bill that night. We had 40 people not show, and not one person asked for a refund.
Wow.
And then the next night, 30, same thing. And then, it was remarkable. It was something that lifted me for sure. But people were willing to get out there and do it, and that's why I think, at the end of the day, it probably was a good idea for there to be an edict from on high saying you must stay home, because people want music, people need that communal spirit and the live thing as much as we do on stage. They need it out in front of it, and people would not probably have stopped coming to the shows if
Right.
they hadn't been told you have to. And I was faced with this, I was playing New York and Saratoga Springs, and the governor had made it where if you have a show, you can only be at 50% capacity. And so only half the room was full. And that's when it got, to be a little bit too much. I was the last show at Passim. I was the last show at the Parlor Room in Northampton, and I was the last show at Cafe Lena in Saratoga Springs. And so it was just like following me.
Oh.
It was an odd. It was unlike any other moment. So once it got to that point, I felt like whether somebody's going to shut this down for me or not, I just felt morally, ethically responsible, because I knew that people were going to come if I kept playing. And I knew, bless their hearts, promoters were still going to put the shows on as long as they were legally allowed, because they got to pay their bills. And I think I can see when people make decisions based on feeding their kids, but I knew at some point I had to make the call and not put people in a situation that's, potentially dangerous for everybody there and their parents and their grandparents.
Yeah.
So that's when we made the call. And once we made the call, that's when all the state and the city leaders started saying, all right, we're shutting it all down. And so it ultimately would have been out of my hands had I waited a day or two.
Right.
And then they shut the border down, so I couldn't get back up to Canada and play with Rose anyway. So it all turned out as it was going to turn out, but strange times, man.
Strange times. Well, let's get our minds off that for a second. Talk to me about, it's been a couple of years since I saw you. You said you've been busy for the last 2 or 3 years touring a bunch. This was your first season of touring, serious touring, since the Civil Wars. What was it like? Was the road the same as you left it, or is it different now, or what was your impression of the last couple of years?
In some ways it's the same, but I think it's just a little harder. I think the pie's a little smaller. I think there's so many things vying for your dollar that I feel like, with the Civil Wars, we were social media was somewhat in its infancy. Facebook had been, MySpace had been around and Facebook had been around, but Twitter was brand new. And it was such a powerful medium. Everybody that would walk out of a show, you knew that 75 to 80% of them would go straight to their Twitter account and either rave or rant about the show and spread it to everyone that they knew. And it was wildfire. It was just like, you could just ignite something pretty quick. And now it's just not used in that same way as it was, and I feel like it's a little harder to move the needle than it used to be. But also, to be fair, with the Civil Wars, there was a shared spotlight, and that really worked better for me than I even knew. And so now it's all me. And
what do you think worked better for you in a shared spotlight?
Probably being able to step forward when my ego allowed it, and to step back and let somebody else have the forefront. Because it ebbs and flows for me. Being a front man is, it works against my personality, I think, a large part of the time. And I'm good at coping, and I enjoy entertaining people, and I enjoy playing for people and singing for people. But, the full-on attention, it's something that, even as I get older, I think I have a harder time with it. I don't crave it like I did when I was, a young man. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a battle there for me, if I'm being completely honest. But, on the flip side of it, when it's 100% your thing and your baby, it's a bit more personal and has a bit more weight to it than it would when you're in a collaborative situation. And, not to say one's better than the other, but the scars are all yours. The wounds are all, the blood is all yours. It's coming out of the vein. And so that's a powerful thing that, it's hard to compare.
So if you don't crave adulation and attention the same way that you did as a young man, what do you find yourself craving more and more now? What's kind of replaced that for you? What's your North Star these days?
Surprisingly, connectivity. I would have never thought that, because I'm a bit of a introvert, and social distancing is something that I have no problem with. But and I think you and I have talked about this when the band went on hiatus. It took a while. It took about a year and a half, but I felt this incessant need, not only to write these songs, but to go out and play them for people and see if they connected with them, and see if it changed them, helped them, hurt them, made them feel something. Because, and I can't really explain why that is, but I know it about myself now. And so every night I go out after shows and talk to people, just because I really need to look in their eyes and know on a gut level that what I'm doing matters to them. And that's what keeps me doing it, because it's tough to make a living out there. As well as I do. You have to be very careful to keep your head above water, and it's a silly way to run a business, to make a living. But as long as that connection feeds me, I'll keep doing it. But when it doesn't, I'll come home and play with my babies.
It is a silly way, because when people find a type of paper towel that they like, they just stick with that paper towel, and they buy that paper towel for the next 60 years of their life until they croak.
Yeah.
Whereas with music, they can come upon your stuff and they can love it. It's amazing. I've talked to people, and they'll be like, "Oh man, I loved your music. In 2012, I was so into it." And it's like, "Wow, okay, well, fair enough, man. I guess people move on sometimes, but it is, and new people do come into the tent for sure." But it is, it can be eerie sometimes to watch people come in and out of your slipstream like that.
Man, it's a very real thing. I do it. I have eras where I can't get enough of Nick Drake, or Tom Waits, or Nick Cave, or and then others where that just doesn't sustain me the way.
Yeah.
And that forces us to constantly be selling, constantly be working and promoting and tapping people on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, I'm still making music, and it might be good for you." That kind of thing that I'm not good at. And I'm also spending a lot of time reintroducing myself to the world. People that knew the Civil Wars, a surprising amount of them have no idea who John Paul White is.
Yes.
I did some support shows out with Shovels and Rope out on the West Coast, and for 7 years I hadn't played any Civil War songs, but I started playing a couple, and I played one, and I had somebody after the show tell me I did a really good cover of that Civil War song. And I simultaneously thought, okay, that's why I'm out here doing this, and I also wanted to punch him in the neck.
Right. Right.
Because I know that there's a base of people out there that are proven to already be into the type of thing that I do, but I haven't reached them, and I'm still working on that. And it's just incremental. It's slowly incremental because there's just so much noise.
Yeah, and there's not just noise, like there's a lot of people releasing records, which there are a lot of people releasing records, but there's noise there's a million other ways to be entertained right now, besides music. We're learning right now on this quarantine thing, I got 2 kids under the age of 3, and we're going back and doing old school stuff right now, you know what I mean? Like stuff that we used to do when I was a kid that had nothing to do with entertaining ourselves all the time, and it's kind of making me realize as a culture how incredibly stimulated we are at all times. And it's really hard to break through that stimulation with your little offering for people,
Yeah, it's very true. I think our generation probably will have less of an issue with it than my kids, for sure, or millennials that have this phone that I've got in my hand has been a part of their life since they were born, and our generation is that latchkey generation that, a lot of us came home after school and fed ourselves and did our homework. And then our parents, who were both working, if you were lucky enough to have your parents still together, came home after work. And there was just, a lot of us took care of ourselves for a better part of our formative years. And I think that that might be something that's beneficial to us. But yeah, it's
there has to be a part of you though that there has to be a part of you that enjoys. You're saying that not all Civil Wars fans know who you are or what your project is. Mm-hmm. There has to be a part of you that enjoys like building something again twice. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure you have a substantial amount of fans that listen to Beulah or whatever that didn't know about that, and it's sort of like, wow, well, I built a thing twice here. You know what I mean? I'm a cockroach. There can be the nuclear blast, and when everything settles down, I'll come back up above ground and I'll start building something again. I mean, there has to be a certain confidence that comes from that.
Yes and no. If I were able to do all this at the same age as the last time around, and the same, I have a different hunger now. My hunger now is to write songs that are as good as Joe Pug's songs. I have a different. I don't.
You gotta set your bar higher,
bro.
The
rhyme and no. Flood and Colors. Jesus Christ, man! That song has so many lyrics in it that make me mad.
Thank you, man.
But anyway, I don't have that hunger of being on the radio or being on MTV or CMT or opening for insert famous band here. I don't have those same wants and needs anymore. And the things that probably would build this, at least in a quicker way, require those kind of hungers. And now I just want to make the best work I can. And I don't have, as I get older, I have less and less urge to do all the other stuff. And we both know all the other stuff still is important to fight through, that proverbial noise. And so the second time around is, I tell you what, man, it feels like a much steeper hill with, and the entire burden is on your shoulders alone as well. And,
yes.
But it's rewarding. Don't let me pretend that it's not rewarding and enjoyable and something that I'm willing to do. It's not as, it's definitely a different work.
You know, you mentioned earlier that you felt like the medium of Twitter and social media being in its infancy when your first project was starting was a real boon. And I felt that too. I often describe it to my wife as, I got started, you know, my first record came out in 2008, 2009, and all that stuff was burgeoning. And the way I describe it to my wife is, I used to put a pound of pressure on something, and I would get the mechanical advantage of about 5 pounds being applied to the object. And now I feel like I'm still putting a pound of pressure on something, except a quarter pound of pressure is being put on the object. It just seems like the mechanical advantage has totally changed. And I really think that has to do with these mediums. They've scaled up, everybody's on them. And now it's, you know, the most, the people getting the mechanical advantage are the people that own and design the platforms themselves.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, there's other forms of income and of advertisement, if for lack of a better word, that are not as viable as they used to be, like in, you know, 2005, 2006, when Long Goodbye came out. That was when music supervisors were still mostly unknown. Alexandra Patsavas came along and was doing Grey's Anatomy and the OC, and she completely changed the game because she was using indie band music in these and breaking bands, and they would put the name of the band at the end of the TV show, and so you discovered music that way. And you know, there for about a 5-year window, that was huge. That was radio for all of us, you know, and it was especially independent bands that didn't cost a lot of money. You could get on these shows, and it was wildfire. All the other shows started realizing, oh, this is a big deal. We should have more of a music supervision budget, and we should make music bigger part of the show. And then everybody figured it out. And now when I talk to my music supervisor friends, they said, we can't possibly listen to a minute fraction of what we're bombarded with by everyone. And so we end up having to just fall on the people that we trust and we know that, you know, always give us what we need, and we can't possibly dig through it, when before we were, you know, knocking on doors and begging people to give us their songs. And that's gone, and that was lifeblood for a lot of people, including the Civil Wars, because, you know, without Grey's Anatomy, a lot of people wouldn't know we existed there in the early years when it really mattered. That's really not a thing like it was. The budgets keep getting smaller and smaller, so if you get on those shows, there's so many shows with Netflix and Hulu and FX, you know, all the original programming that all these other cable stations are doing is just really diluted for us as musicians. So yeah, the playing field's completely different.
I can identify with John Paul's disconnect, with the vigor he had as a young man for conquering the world, so to say. That's definitely a young man's and a young woman's game. As I've said before, there's not enough money in the world to make me go back and relive my 20s. Too much uncertainty, too much confusion. But once you're looking back at it with rose-colored glasses, once you forget all the turmoil, once your memory has smoothed out all of its warts, that passion of youth might look something like Dylan Thomas described it in his iconic poem, Fern Hill. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb golden in the heydays of his eyes. And honored among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns, And once below a time, I lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. And green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running, it was lovely, the hayfields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys, it was air and plain, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly, under simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the night jars flicking with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake, and the farm, like a wanderer white with dew, come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining, it was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable on to the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house, under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways. My wishes raced through the house high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades, that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs, before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days, that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand, in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields, and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea.
I wanted to, one of my favorite things that one of my favorite aphorisms that you kind of said last time we talked on this show, and for listeners who are listening now that haven't listened to your first interview, I encourage you to go back and check it out. You were talking about the job as a songwriter being, maybe one of your mentors told you this, to, chop them up and stack them high. Just write songs and put them there. Do you feel like for that method to work, do you feel like you have to be in a place where you have a publishing deal signed so that there is somebody there who has an interest, they've bought in, they own a piece of it, and now because they have an interest, they're out there working with it? Do you feel like that's an integral part of that process, or do you feel like just chop them up and stack them high even if you own all your own pub?
I think both those things are true. I think it's still 100% valid, mostly because when somebody comes along and they love what you do, oh, you like that? Well, here's 10 more. Here's 15 more. And that doesn't mean quantity over quality by any means. I mean, the older I get, the smaller that stack gets, because I'm so much more picky lyrically. I'm so, my old mentor, when he would go write a song with like a big hit songwriter, I'd tell him, I'd be like, so who you writing with today? And he'd tell me, and I'd be, oh my gosh, y'all are going to write a killer song. He was like, no, probably not. I said, really? He said, yeah, because we've been doing this long enough that we know really quickly when something's average. Yeah. And we don't throw out dumb ideas because, we've whittled our brains to the point that it's so fine a point on it that we know by lunchtime, like, man, we should just go to the movies. Yeah. And so you don't end up writing a song. And I totally get it now. That doesn't mean I'm a better writer necessarily. I think I'd like to hope that I am. but I do think that I have a better sense of what I think is great. And I know pretty quickly when it's not. And so I just move on to the next song, and you'll never hear it. So it's harder to stack that thing up. But I still think it's true. You cannot sit and live and die with one song. You can't have this opus that you always, hang your hat on. It's just, it'll be the death of your creativity. You've got to wash your hands of it. Oh, wow, there's a phrase we should use now.
Yeah.
You've got to wash your hands of it and move on and say, all right, I did that. Now what's next? And stack them up. You never know when a song from 20 years ago is going to be relevant right now. And so that's definitely words I live by.
When you say, you can't just live on one song that's a magnum opus, you have to wash your hands and move on. To you, does that mean on a practical level, if you have something that's like that, where you just stop playing it in concert, you don't want to have to rely on that anymore?
No.
Or is it less serious than that?
I think it's less serious than that. I think it's just don't chase it. Don't. I had a buddy wrote a big hit, Moon Over Georgia, for the band Shenandoah. His name's Mark Narmore. He wouldn't mind me telling the story. He's one of my favorite people. He was one of the first people to give me a shot as a co-writer when I was green and had nothing going on. I love that guy. And he told me, he said, man, I spent 5 years trying to rewrite Moon Over Georgia because that song was such a hit and clicked with so many people. I thought, well, I got to do that again. Yeah. That's my calling card. That's my thing I do. And he said, I finally figured out that, that was never going to work. It was just derivative and just, that was the thing. I had captured it. I was lucky to be young and early in my career and really articulate that thing that I wanted to, and it was time to move on. And I think maybe some people have one song in them. Yeah. I think some people they have that one thing that they can articulate better than anyone else on earth. And maybe that's it. Yeah. And your one-hit wonders of the world. But I think more often than not, they got more in them. They just won't detach and say, okay, I did that. Now let's access another part of my brain and detail that for folks. I'm very willing. I do not look back. I have no urge to repeat myself. I have no urge to rehash anything. It just bores me to death.
Yeah. I ran into that problem big time. My first record had a song that people still love to hear in concert. It's called Hymn 101, and I spent about 5 years. Yeah. It was about 5 years. Yeah. It's funny that your friend would have used that number of years. It was 5 years that I tried to write, that song was Hymn 101. I tried to write the other 100 hymns in there, and it took me a long time to let that part of my creative self die and just realize what a fool's errand it was to be on it. It froze me up inside. From moving on and changing as a person.
Yeah. I mean, but it's like so many things with the creative process. You can't tell people that. We all figure it out in our own time, and some people are young and they figure this stuff out way quicker than I did. But it just now, will I play those songs live? Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's what brought people to the table, and that's what it's connecting. That's what people still feel something from those songs, and I play them. So in that way, I'm more than happy to connect to the past. But creatively, no, I want to turn over new rocks and find bigger, fatter worms.
What is it like doing business now with your record label and your own songs and career? What's it like doing business not in Nashville? What's it like doing it in Alabama? Do you feel like that's helped you or hindered you in any way, or you think it doesn't matter? How do you think that's affected both the trajectory of your music and the trajectory of Single Lock?
Well, it's all I know. I never moved up there, and even during the time when I was writing songs for Music Row, I just drove back and forth, and that was about 12 or 13 years of writing. So I never really 100% immersed myself in that world, and so I always had the outsider mentality, being down here, and was surrounded by people that had that same mentality, that had, since the 60s, been making hit music without being in a hub. So it was kind of second nature to create that way. And as a label, all the folks, at least the nucleus of the label, they're all Alabamians, all Florence, Muscle Shoals residents, except, one Tuscaloosan, I guess.
Fair enough.
And it's really all we know. Now, I do think it gives us an advantage. I think not only being from a unique perspective of being from a town or a group of towns that aren't Nashville or LA or Chicago or New York, and it gives it a little bit of a storyline, but being from the Shoals, I mean, especially overseas, you say that word and people take you seriously, that people pay attention. Like, all right, this has name value. This has, there's ancestry there. So let's give it a shot. And so that definitely helps us. But there's a lot of things that we just don't know any better. And that's really what made music here great back in the day, is that they just didn't know any better. They didn't have any boxes to fit in or to worry about fitting in. They just followed their gut because there was just zero rules, zero budget. They were just making music because they loved it, and that's what we do. And we're lucky that we're able to keep our head above water and do that. Who knows how long we can, but at the moment, we really, truly make music and work with artists that we feel like the world has to have to be healthy and alive, and to be healthier and more alive. And I mean, that's a good way to spend your day, and a good way to sleep well at night.
It is. It is a really good way to. Like, my wife is a public school teacher, and I always joke with her after she's had a hard day, well, at least you don't have trouble looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning, because she knows exactly what she's doing. And I'm not comparing what we're doing to a public school teacher. I think that's much harder. But this still is a job where there's plenty of things that I worry about. Raising 2 kids and paying a mortgage on a musician's lifestyle is something I worry about a lot. But I don't worry about having to look myself in the mirror, which is great.
Yep.
For our younger listeners, or maybe young at heart, who are just getting started playing music and don't have a lot going on now, from your perspective as someone who owns and runs a label, besides the quality of the song, because obviously song is king, what qualities are you looking for in a prospective artist that you would sign?
More often than not, within 10 seconds, I'm clicking with it, or I'm not. That's not always true. Some things are a slow burn, and you got to get in there, but there always seems to be a hint of it being something novel, something unique, something with a different angle, and not because they're trying to find something unique or trying to be different, but all the things that I consider great, they have just a unique perspective to them. They're coming at it just from a slightly different viewpoint than you'd heard before or you would. And if not, then I can't help but just, oh, that sounds like so-and-so, or that sounds like, right, I've heard this before, kind of thing. You can't help yourself. Doesn't mean it's not quality, but I just feel like in today's day and age, just being quality it's not that it's not enough, but it's really hard to cut through all this noise we keep talking about without having that unique perspective. The problem is you're born with that or you're not. If you have a voice like Paul Janeway of St. Paul and the Broken Bones, I heard his voice for 5 seconds through a cell phone. When it was presented to me, it was like, yeah, done. I'm in, 100%.
Right.
It's not because he hits high notes. There's a lot of people who can hit high notes, but there's just some people have a quality. They have this unnameable fiber to what they're doing. That, and it might be, they may be horrible singers.
Mm-hmm.
They may be just rudimentary guitar players, but you just feel an honesty. You just feel something that's just tugging at you, like, I need to hear that again, or I need to hear the next line. I need, it's something I can't put my finger on, but anytime somebody plays me something, I'll usually know within not even a song, 10, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I know if I'm into it or not.
Yeah.
I know if they're on to something.
I find a lot with myself. I think about that a lot. I write a ton of songs, and not all songs that I write are quote-unquote Joe Pug songs. Most songs that I write are not.
Yeah.
And I really try to curate records. I don't want to put anything on a quote-unquote Joe Pug record that doesn't sound like that, because not that I don't want my sound to change and morph and grow richer over time, but I do want, within the first 30 seconds, if you just put on a song cold, for people who know my music, you go, oh yeah, that's a Joe Pug song, for sure. Do you write songs that are not John Paul White songs?
Yes. But, I professionally did that for, as I said, for about 12 years. All of my songs were written for others. That's not necessarily true. The first 3 or 4 years, all of my songs were written for others. And I was failing miserably at trying to write songs that I thought other people would want to cut. And as soon as I started writing songs that I loved and was for me, I started getting cuts. So, but, I do not necessarily do what you're talking about. And I think different strokes, but for me, there's times when I just have to rely on the fact that it's my voice and my heart there that's going to tie these things together. But there's songs on Beulah that are really incompatible with songs that are on the Hurtin' Kind. And my first record, Long Goodbye, is a rock record that I was listening to a lot of Jeff Buckley and Radiohead. It's very obvious when you listen to it. And so it's just, for me, I pray that my melodic sensibilities and my voice tie these songs together enough that I'm allowed to do whatever I want to do in that chapter in my life. And but I think every artist is different. I think it's what makes you click. I feel like I'm probably more of a, like Neil Young kind of artist, that each record, I don't even know what it's going to be. And it may be just roughly comparable to the last record, but it's still me, and it's still my voice, and it's still my, sadness or longing or whatever it is that I'm always trying to work out. It's always there.
Indeed. Well, brother, thank you for sitting down and talking with me for a few minutes here. My
pleasure.
Man, I just always love talking to you, man. You got such amazing insights, brother. So,
well, I love talking to you too, because enjoyable or not, I always talk about stuff that I never talk about with other people, and that's good, man. It's always a moment where I realize that people like us need to talk to each other more, because I dig down in there with you more than I would, most others, and I make more sense when I talk to folks like you. So.
Well, right on, brother.
We should do this more.
That's a huge compliment. We will do this more. I'll put you in my. I have a rotation of about a dozen people that I call after 2 beers to scream about stuff for about a half hour. So I'll put you there. Okay. All right. All right. Good.
Hey, honestly, put that out in the world, social media wise. Like right now, with everybody holed up at home.
Yep.
You and I both know a bunch of people that need checked on.
We both know I know a lot of people that live alone, and particularly a lot of them tend to be musicians. And I'm thinking about that a lot. I'm trying to hit. I saw someone put up on social media, try to hit 5 a day. I haven't been able to do that so far, but I'm trying to hit.
That's at least a lot.
That's a lot. But I'm trying to do 1 or 2 a day, because, I mean, it's all fun and games. It's kind of a snow day right now, but once it hits 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it's going to get strange for people.
It's going to be real. One a day, man.
Yeah.
Because you and I both, we also have complex minds too, and I think if you dig down in there too far, it's hard to come back out of there, man. So you got to think of your own health as well.
No, for real. Well, man, thanks for coming on, and I'll give you a buzz sometime. I wish you and your family the best, brother.
Thanks. Back at you, buddy.
Bye.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for being here. It was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. John Paul White's latest album is entitled The Hurting Kind, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.